Hey gamers, this is Liz Davidson from Beyond Solitaire, and today I'm going to be reviewing Bloc by Bloc Uprising. This is the third edition of a cooperative uprising game designed by T.L. Simons, and this version is co-designed by Greg Loring Albright. This is a review copy, so take that into account as you watch. So this is a two-player setup of Bloc by Bloc. It's a cooperative game, so this is also the setup that you'd use when you're playing it solo. You could play with up to 4 players, but really it's easier just to manage 2 factions. So what we've got here is we have a city, and the city has several districts that are occupied by police. And then we also have starting occupations in districts that match our faction type. So there are 4 factions in the game. I randomly drew prisoners and neighbors for this, but you could also have students and workers. And basically the idea is that all these different groups are unhappy with the way the city has been run, and the names of their locations really say something about that. So you have a garment sweatshop. You have an underfunded high school. We have the projects or a polluted slum. The prisoners are stuck in things like the Supermax prison or the immigration detention center. So even the names of the things in the city imply quite a bit of injustice. And that is what we are supposed to be having an uprising against in the city. Basically, what this game works is that you have a total of 10 turns to try to win, and you win by having each faction place their completion token on a condition that's up here. So let me show you what those look like. Throughout the game, we're going to be revealing these condition cards, and these are all potential ways to win the game. So we have Liberated Telecom Network Hub. We need to build an occupation in this liberated district. So what that would mean is that we need to find the telecom hub, which is right here. We need to liberate it, which means we need to get the police out. And we also need to flip the tile over. So all these tiles flip to more colorful sides, and there are some special things underneath them as well. And you would need to build an occupation there. And so whichever player manages to do that first is going to be the one who gets to put their token here for completion. And then the other player, or in my case, since I would be playing solo, the other faction is also going to need to complete a condition that comes off of the condition deck. And then once we've both done that, then we win. And we have this timer, this time limit in which to do so. So how are we going to do that? We're going to do that by basically proceeding through the game and taking our actions as well as we possibly can. So the game is divided into nighttime and daytime segments. At night, we're going to start with police ops, where we draw a police ops card and resolve it. We start with just 1 card while the police morale is at the timid level, but there will be cards that make their morale go up until they're deadly. There are also things you can do in the game to bring police morale down and decrease the number of cards they're drawing if you need to. But usually the police are going to move, or more police are going to come out. Basically, things are going to happen in the police ops deck that you don't like and that are frightening to you. So in this one, the groups of police squads would advance into adjacent prisoners' districts. Those are the orange ones. And as you can see, that's pretty easy for them to do. These are not adjacent, but this one certainly is. Once the police have had a chance to do their ops, then it's the player turn. So each player is now going to take their turn. So the first thing you're going to do is roll your dice. Let's say it's Orange's turn. So you'd roll all of your dice. This is what we've ended up with. And you place 1 new block in your starting district. So you expand a little bit and you get some action dice. Then you use these dice to take actions. There are some basic actions that let you do things like just move. So you can essentially move anywhere where there are road connections, or using metro stops if the metro is open. So right now we see that it is. You can also use dice to build barricades. So if we'd started adjacent to some police, we would start with barricades on this map setup. There's a randomized map setup each time. But at any time, you can build up to 3 barricades between tiles. Then there are some advanced actions, and those actions are based on the total of your dice. So basically you need to hit certain totals. You can combine dice and treat them as 1 single die to hit the totals you need, or if you roll high, then you can just spend 1 die. So basically this is your die pool, and you need to hit certain numbers, but if you've rolled high, you might have more options. So if you're not currently in a clash with the police, your advanced actions include looting, building occupations, and then swapping occupations. So basically you need to get yourself more little bases around town. And the ones that you build after this starting one are going to have special abilities that are helpful to you. The other thing that you can do is a set of attack actions. So if you are in a clash, which means that you're sharing your tile with police, Depending on who is there, then you can either defeat one single squad, which would mean one cube. You can kick 2 cubes out to an adjacent space. So if we are here, we could kick the cubes out in a direction of our choice. And then your third option is to attack police vans. They are very difficult to defeat. You basically have to manage multiple attacks against them before they have a chance to reconstitute themselves. So you can disable them, but if you want them gone, you've really got to put your back into it. Then there's going to be a retaliation step where these cards are revealed, and we find out some more about what the police are going to do. So this is where the vans are repaired and where police attack. So this game is obviously meant to mimic popular uprisings against oppressive governments. According to an interview I did a while ago with Greg Loring Albright and some of the material about this game, this is meant to evoke multiple different uprisings across the world, including things like the Arab Spring. Although to me, this feels very, very much like a way of playing out protests in the United States, possibly because of the art style and because of my own experience as somebody who watches the news in the US. So one of the things that's quite interesting about this particular game as well is looting. So all these shopping centers can be looted, but you can choose the way you want to do it. So basically, if you want a loot card, which is pretty handy right away, when you loot, you have to put down a fire token and you basically burn the place that you looted. You have a different choice, however, which is to put graffiti there. And if you let a bunch of graffiti pile up in places where you have some influence, then that can actually pay larger benefits later, but it doesn't necessarily get you the resources you need right now. So looting represents sort of a moral and a resource management choice within the game. The other thing that's quite interesting thematically about the game is the need for solidarity. Really, your faction cannot do anything alone. It absolutely needs other factions to help out. And if you do not help each other, then you're not going to get where you need to go. But the other thing is that even to get winning conditions out, you have to be willing to send people to meetings. And that means that you have to take some of your cubes temporarily off the map in order to go to these meetings and reveal these conditions. So you'll have to work together in order to reveal the conditions that are going to allow you all to win as a team. So basically what this boils down to is it is an uprising themed, somewhat more juiced up version of Pandemic, where the police are causing problems everywhere. Y'all are doing your best to solidify your little strongholds, to liberate areas, and you ultimately want to prevail in Bloc City before the countdown winds down. So that's an overview of Bloc by Bloc. Let's go ahead and have some final thoughts. All right, so now for some final thoughts. I can totally see why a lot of people really love Bloc by Bloc, including people like my friend Jason Perez and Dan Thoreau, whose reviews I really enjoy. However, I thought that it was just okay. And the reason that I thought that is because I feel that the theme is very ambitious, and I'm not sure that the gameplay lives up to that ambition. So I think we should talk first about the theming. I personally think that you can make board games about just about anything, and it's the treatment of the subject that makes the game truly interesting. So I want to see how it's coming out in the mechanisms, I want to see how it's coming out in the design and the art, and I want to see, which historical notes it's hitting. So for me, it's a lot less about what the game is about than about how it does it. And in many ways, I do think the game does a good job of representing an uprising that is justified against police. It's really, really clear that the people in this town are oppressed. It's clear that they're trying to band together to overcome bad things like polluted slums or sweatshops, or really things that nobody should be subjected to in a good society. And I also like the way that the game forces some solidarity, that you have to send multiple cubes to meetings in order to uncover victory conditions, that you have to work together in order to overthrow the police. However, I think that the way the theme is implemented, specifically that it steps away from specific historical events and instead wants to evoke them in this fake variable city with these kind of almost cute cartoon blocks, I personally felt that took something away. Like, I can see how you might prefer it because it's more theoretical, so you can think maybe without risk, right? Well, or with less risk about what it would be like to do an uprising. What conditions would cause one. But for me, the detachment from reality actually took away from it. And the reason I feel that way is that I think that there are a lot of moral ambiguities to some of the things you're asked to do in the game. So one of the issues we could talk about is attitudes towards police. I think we're all somewhere on a spectrum right now. But the one aspect of the game that I really want to talk about to illustrate this is looting. So in the game, you're given a choice about how to loot. You can either burn down a shop and get a benefit now, or you can tag it with graffiti and then maybe benefit from it later. And so, there's kind of am I building up the community or am I tearing it down, sort of tension. However, I don't really think that expresses looting well enough because I don't think it's personal enough. I think that if you're going to walk into, your neighbor's corner store in the community that you say you care about and take their stuff and maybe light it on fire, that maybe you need to grapple with some consequences of that. When I interviewed Greg Loring Albright, he talked about looting, being treated as an academic subject and recommended a book. I'll go look it up, hopefully, and put it in the show notes. There are people who talk about looting as a part of these uprisings in a way that's not 100% looting bad and negative. I still feel 100% bad and negative about it, and I really wish that you had to look somebody in the eye when you burn down their shop. And I sort of feel like this idea that the other people in your community are okay with you taking their stuff and messing with their small businesses potentially, it's interesting, but we should have to grapple with it more. And there are other aspects of the game, again, that I think are kind of almost sanded away by the cuteness of the blocks, by the abstractness of the colors. Even though the police are white cubes, ooh, how symbolic. I still think that there's enough depersonalization going on here that it doesn't quite express the nastiness of going through something like this. And that sanitization displeases me. I also think that, yes, there's a semi-co-op mode for the game, but I still don't think that it introduces enough suspicion and enough kind of toughness of messing up a social movement for everybody else to get yours that would happen in an actual historical version of this game, of an uprising. And so I think the game has a lot of aspirations that are cool, and I think that it does play some of them out. The game actually gives you sort of interesting ideas about how uprisings play out and the way that people can band together to make them work, and the relationship between meetings and trying to do good things in the community. Some of the liberation cards are super interesting. But I also think I would have preferred something that was more gritty and realistic to talk about this issue, because I think that it's almost like the uprising is a little too nice and too heroic to be real in this version of the game. I also do want to talk about gameplay. For the most part, gameplay is not bad. The rulebook is super clear. I really appreciated that. Gameplay is simple. You could really teach this game to anybody. It's it's maybe about as difficult as Pandemic, maybe a bit longer than Pandemic to play. And, the variability of the city, there's a lot of really neat stuff that's going on mechanically in the game. I think it's really nicely put together. The product is really nice. That said, I think there's a lot lacking in the AI, and that is a problem, in my opinion, for a cooperative game. So, the police are your enemy in this game, and they attack different spaces, they move to different places, they have different focuses depending on which cards you draw. And I felt like the AI was too clunky and too unintentional to really appreciate in this game. So your games are going to swing a lot. Some of them are going to be easy because it's why are the police focusing on this totally unrelated thing to what we're doing right now? Oh, well, I guess I better liberate some tiles and make my uprising strong while I can. And then other times it's the police are just relentless, hit, but it's not on purpose because it's an AI deck. And so I felt that the game's AI and its engine don't work well enough to have a fully satisfying experience, and especially not a consistently satisfying experience, which I was disappointed in. That said, I really like the way that the dice are used in the game. I like the way that the people can play their own actions out. So as a human player, I really liked what I was able to do, and I liked my decision space, but the AI response wasn't robust enough for my tastes. I guess that leads to a conclusion of, I think the Block by Block is an interesting game. It's definitely not an all-time favorite for me. It plays well enough to appreciate a few times. It's not going to stay permanently in my collection. So I'm really glad that I experienced this game and that I got to have a look at the thoughts behind it. But I really would prefer something that's more gritty and real if I'm going to game an uprising, which sounds weird because, we talk about war games being about difficult topics. Well, I would like to embrace the difficulty and to grapple a little bit more. But that said, this is a game that I overall appreciate. I think it's worth playing if you come across it. It's just maybe not hitting on all cylinders for me. So thank you so much for watching. Please like, subscribe, comment, and most of all, happy gaming.